In our last long form video, we talked about the testimony of Dan Burrish, Bob Lazar, and others discussing the secrets of Project Looking Glass, these operations that were happening at S4 in Groom Lake, Nevada at Area 51. And there are more videos and documentation coming out that seems to support Dan Burrish's testimony. Now, there are a lot of debunkers. We don't know if this is real, but in these new videos from Dan Burrish, he talks about the secret organization called Majestic 12 or MJ12. And so I decided I wanted to look into it to see if I could find any documents on it on any official websites. And it's still kind of a paradox. We don't know if this is real or if it's not, but we need to get into it.
There is a connection between the paranormal, UFOs, and the myths of ancient history. The clues are scattered across the landscape from a forbidden past, maybe even in your own backyard. There is a connection between the true nature of our reality, consciousness, and the unexplained. I'm Carl the Crusher. Let's explore the unknown.
Before we get too far down the rabbit hole, I have to give a special shout out to all of my Patreon subscribers and followers. They are part of the Patreon inner circle and members of the Crusher Crew. If you want to join and be a member of the Crusher Crew, I'm getting ready to release my latest book. I'm going to have an exclusive release for pre-orders on my Patreon page, and the book is going to be called Psionic Contact. It's all about the meditation methods and real-world techniques for psionic operations, and this comes from my experience going out into the field doing CE5 gateway protocol type meditations in order to summon UFOs and UAP to appear and to have contact with them, telepathic contact. I talk about some of the history of that, some of the exploitation programs, and I get into all of the different levels of consciousness going all the way through the subconscious and the dream states, all the way up into psionic landscaping, psionic exploration, and a whole lot more. So make sure and go join the Patreon inner circle and become a member of the Crusher Crew. We've got some more videos from Dan Burrish, this whistleblower who has come out and talked about his experience working firsthand with a J-Rod, with a gray alien that allegedly was crashed or captured in some kind of a UFO crash recovery incident that was then moved to the S4 facility at Area 51. In our latest video, long form video, we went into the details about this, but we focused mostly on Project Looking Glass, this technology where psionic assets are interfaced with some kind of a reverse engineered alien device and more modern interfaced with artificial intelligence in order to communicate with extraterrestrials or non-human entities, and also to do a form of time travel, looking into the future and looking into the past. Now, according to Dan Burrish's other testimonies and videos where he's come out and talked about this, he goes into a little bit more detail about an encounter that he had with this non-human entity that he was interviewing and doing biological studies with. He claims that he had telepathic communication with this and a whole encounter that totally unraveled him and his consciousness. And he also goes into more detail about some time travel incidents. Now, this is all really fascinating. It's all very speculative, but there is a very kind of intense and scary moment where you can tell in this other video that Dan Burrish is extremely upset and passionate about his story and that it's true and that there's people out there trying to debunk him, and he gets very upset about it. But then he shows video evidence of a time when he claims that he was assaulted by a secret organization that he claims was attached or associated with Majestic 12, this gatekeeper unit that was sent out to basically silence him. And it looks like they were really rough with him and beat him up. So let's go ahead and listen to Dan Burrish and look at the images from when his hand was broken and when he was allegedly assaulted by this MJ12 group.
Look, in 2003, my window for my IM opened up. That was guaranteed by Majestic. They arranged it. So I told the truth.
They asked, you told.
Then I was told by Majestic, shut up.
Yeah.
So what did I do?
Shut up.
I stayed in the back room while you had your party,
I know.
and I shut up.
Yeah.
Then they ordered me to tell the truth.
Yeah.
So I went out and I told the truth. I was assailed by people then who wanted me to tell their truth. Well, I'm sorry, they're a little bit old for this kind of magical thinking where they can dictate to me what my experiences are. I'm personally, I'm fed up. I am not. I I absolutely refuse to back off or back down. Look, face it. My anger is not directed at the good people out there who just want to know the truth.
I know.
Now, if people want to ask polite questions of me, I will answer politely. They treat me with respect, I treat them with respect. And I always treat them with respect first, or at least I try. A couple of them have.
Yeah, well, I
and
saw
then when I
one.
told them the truth eye to eye, then they just go, oh!
I saw the eyes turn down.
What's the game here? Is that because you've got something in your closet that you don't want exposed? What is it going to be next? Is it going to be, did I look to the side too many times? You go through what I've gone through and not flinch. That's it. See, they keep looking for something that ain't there.
Right. Or they want to try to hook you up to some frickin' whatever.
Oh, a
it is.
quack box.
A quack box.
Yeah. The next thing is going to be a phrenology machine to tell me whether or not I can be a secretary.
Because
it'll thump around on the bumps on my cranium.
Cranium to see what kind of a person you are.
Yeah, it's just more crap.
It's
It's crap. It's poodles jumping through hoops.
Well, I'm not going to do it.
I'm not going to do it after what I've been through.
No. No.
When is the last time they've been beat into the floor? When is the last time somebody has ever, crushed their hand under a foot?
Broke their bones.
What do they know? They don't know jack. That's what they know. They don't know jack. I'm the one that was shoved inside of that clean sphere. I'm the one that had to face what I had to face. They didn't. So what do they have to say to me about it? All I ask is a little human reciprocity, a little human respect out of them. If they can't muster it up, take it down the road and keep it away from me.
This is not bullshit. This is the real thing.
Yeah.
So if you could reiterate kind of how you started working with J-Rod.
Well, he was working with me before I ever knew it. Of course, he was on board, as I understand. I have no memory of him directly, but I mean, as I understand, in '73. He had traveled to 73, and then this is even what I said to Jeff Rentz on the phone. I said, my God, if this doesn't boggle, it boggles my mind when you think about paradoxes to start with, that he traveled to 73, I was picked up, and then he subsequently traveled back to the 53 time frame, and there was a crash, which means that he was held at S4 in 1973 at the time that I was playing baseball with my grandpa, and that he was also on board the craft, impinging into our time, lifting me up. Prosaically, it sounds crazy, but it's a paradox, I guess. But I actually came into direct contact with him at the end of 1993, start of 94. There is something wrong with him. During the entirety of my experience around him, he appeared, the best that I can describe as off-shifted. Almost like, he was physical. I felt him through the glove. There was matter there with me, but almost like he was a ghost with a body. He didn't belong. He did not belong where he was. Yet, when he would communicate, when he would do the entrainment, they thump you, it's almost acoustically. They thump you, and until they finally come into contact with the brain level waves where they can begin communicating. And it comes in waves. It's almost like clicks of a dolphin. It comes in waves. And then you feel yourself pulled in as the entrainment is occurring, that the perception is being pulled into his eyes. Very unwieldy feeling. But then they entrain, bringing you down to relaxed, almost to a theta state, like an 8 hertz type theta state, where you're very almost like drowsy, and they tell you, they're not going to hurt you. He did that. He actually said that he would not harm me. When he stepped forward on me when we were doing the old bride's dance, as we nicknamed it, where I was supposed to step forward to him, almost like taking a bride step up the aisle, and then he did the thing back to me, almost jokingly, but it was so unwieldy because he broke the protocol. It's like everything that had been established of trust at that moment, it went to hell. And I got so afraid. There was an animal response in me at that moment, a very, very human animalistic response of get me the hell out of here. And I stepped backward and fell backward onto my back. And that is really what I perceived myself as doing. I said to Jeff, felt like I was a cockroach, lying on my back in there. And he walked up onto me, and I heard them yelling, "Fire the repress." They were going to intumesce him. They were going to hurt him so that he wouldn't hurt me. And I was trying to yell no, and I'm not even sure to this day if I really yelled no or if it was just in my mind. The stress was that bad at the moment. And he literally walked up onto me and sat on my chest. He didn't knock me over. I mean, there was, I think Ron or a couple other people said, he knocked you over in the clean. He couldn't knock me over. He was too weak to knock me over. He even if he wasn't given his size, he couldn't have knocked me over.
And how tall was he?
Just a little over 3 feet, hunched down, almost 4 feet if he was to be extended out lengthwise, if he would be lying on his back and extended out lengthwise. But the malady, the pathologies under which he was suffering caused him to have weakness, change of gait, change of stance, where most of the time he was extremely hunched over forward, and he really couldn't stand up straight. When he would walk, he would wobble and kind of shuffle.
So he got on your chest. He walked onto your chest, or sat on your chest.
He was actually sitting on my abdomen area, but he was leaning forward with his hands onto my chest, looking down.
So he was communicating at that moment that he wasn't going to hurt you?
Yes, he said, I won't hurt you, Beanie. He called me Beanie. And that goes to Beanie. He broke English up very strangely.
And you heard this in your head, I'm assuming. I
heard it in my head.
It wasn't out loud.
No, I heard it in my head, in my own introspective voice, but clearly not coming from me. Mm-hmm. The sound of yourself when you talk to yourself, self-talk. It's the same sound, except it's the wrong linguistics. It's the wrong wording. You could tell it's not you. And initially, when that happens too, there is from my perspective, initially when it was happening, there was a very panicky feeling. But of course, that initially happened when I was part of the B unit team, when Stephen was still going in to the clean sphere. He looked at me through the clean sphere and spoke to me and said, "I remember," and hello.
Meaning
to me.
the person who it was, you call, what is his name again? The J-Rod looked at you.
Kaela
looked at you when Steve was in the clean sphere with him. He turned around and looked at you.
Yeah, he turned around and looked at me. I was part of the B unit team to start with. In fact, that was going to be my actual occupation in there, was assisting the chief scientist in going into the clean sphere, until he identified me as somebody, I guess, special to him, Kaela, and he wanted me to be the person to go in there. That's why I was promoted ultimately to the working group leader in there because I didn't have the background, did not have the seniority, and it was not my place. But that's why the promotion happened. It was
Okay. So he went onto your chest. He told you he wasn't going to hurt you. Did they actually zap him then, or did they?
I don't believe so, because I would have felt he began to entrain me immediately and strongly, and he relaxed me. The enkephalins, the endorphins were going big time. They entrain on several levels, and they're able to relax you by actually flooding you with natural opiates.
Mm-hmm.
Like a runner's high.
Right.
So what happened after that? I'm assuming
Or
you
the
got
high
to.
that you receive as you're going through natural death process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you naturally kick out the,
Yeah.
But okay. But what happened after that?
After that, I began to sink away from what was going on in the clean sphere, and with the panic that was going on over the radios, because I heard them. We had two separate units, an A unit and a B unit on the radio. They were like separate radio frequencies. And I could push the button and talk independently, but they were stepping over each other, screaming, saying, get a secondary unit ready to get me out of there. They were going to enter in to pull me out. And you can't just step in there that quickly. I mean, they've got to suit somebody up, bring them in, and you knew before you were going in there that the J-Rod, we were trained that they were a threat. And
Really?
so that we were not supposed to communicate privately with them or anything like that, that we had a certain job to do and we were to get it done. And that was the scientific job of removing the samples, and then the studying of the samples for the back engineering. These are the reversing like chemicals.
The idea was to reverse an illness that he and his people have, which is the 52.
The 52s, and what we were trying to do initially, jumping off onto the biology a little bit, what we were trying to do is we were trying to actually strip the exterior cytoplasm off from the cells and produce cells which would be independently functioning, then to understand those cells biochemically, genetically, so that those cells could then be re-added as a graft into the J-rod to attempt to ameliorate the neuropathy. That's what one of the stated goals was. Easier said than done. But we were told, though, that if something would go wrong in there would be no immediate fix. You weren't a million miles away, but you were several thousand when you were inside there. So you were very alone, even though you had radio communication. It was essentially being isolated on a space shuttle, if you will. And not that easy to get you home. Because they had to do all of the repressurizations of the gantry, bring somebody new in, then get you out, then get you detox, the cleansing, the decontamination, and then get you out of there, then get you out of the suit, then give you medical treatment. So we're talking a couple hours. So if something goes wrong in there, and they were potentially able to harm you because of the entrainment, you're dead. And that's, you accepted before you ever accepted going in there. But to a large part, it wasn't bravado on our part saying it's no big thing, but you had to accept that just to work inside the facility. You knew that if there was a contamination, if the alarms started going off, the old joke was get in a straight back chair and lean way over and kiss your goodbye. It was over. Because if the alarm started going off, you were sealed into the facility, and they were going to pump the gas in and fire the fuel air device. Boom. That's what the explosive valves were for, the so-called escape tunnels. For you to get out in case there was an emergency, those were blow-off vents. So they could blow off and explode the facility, blow off out of the papoose range, and keep the remainder of the facility intact.
Were you afraid for your life at any time? In other words,
I was afraid for my
actually,
life when he stepped toward me. Absolutely, I was.
At that moment.
At that moment, but it was a very transient. It was an ephemeral moment.
Okay. How did you?
It passed off very quickly because biochemistry helped me calm down when he trained me.
How did you feel, though, in your sort of interactions with him? In other words, do you feel that you said you didn't remember knowing him in the original meeting in the spaceship, right?
Right.
But he remembered clearly.
He remembered.
So did you feel that you actually developed a friendship with this being?
I absolutely did. I'll say that. I felt a kinship to him all along from the time that he first looked over at me. And that may have been a consequence of me being picked up in the park. That may have been. My trust in what he was saying to me grew over time.
Because I remember asking you that.
Yeah,
specifically asking you that.
My trust grew over time.
But
there
perhaps
was an
deeper
extant
level
kinship there with him. And I think that may have started because of the pickup in '73. I think, but I'm trying to surmise it. There was a pickup of the jovial nature of our friendship over time, certainly, because I've got kind of a strange sense of humor, and he was able to be friends with that kind of same weird sense of humor, where he would look over at me, he would tell me that what his behavior was, because I couldn't tell when he was happy or when he was sad because of physical characteristics that easily. You can tell fairly quickly with a human being from now if they're happy, if they're smiling at you. But I couldn't tell if that was pain or what it was on his face until he specifically informed me that that's his smile, that's his laugh. As that grew, and my relationship with him grew, I became more attuned to his physical responses as well. And I think that picked our friendship up as well, because I'm more associating with another human being with physical reactions as well, in the communication, and they were less so that was difficult. That was very difficult until I became attuned, where I became more relaxed into what his physical responses were. When I knew he was laughing after that, then that got me into trouble with the folks in the facility, because I reacted naturally to his physical responses. And so I would smile or whatever over at him, and they would say, "What is transpiring between you two?" I'd hear it come over the radio. Sometimes I would out and out lie to them and say nothing, because I was afraid. I had a fear of losing his friendship too, because I wanted to learn more from him. And these are the same people that will point a gun at me with very little compunction against it. I was willing to befriend him too, because he was a captive there, as I was feeling too a captive within Majestic, because I had been brought into a program that I had no clue before what I was being brought into. But the thing which was developed was the inability to disentrain, to break off from him.
Even when you left the clean sphere? In other words, regardless of where you were?
Within a certain range, within, like a 15-meter range from him.
For example, now?
I could...
Right now, could you feel his pain?
No.
If you wanted you to feel it, could you?
No, I don't believe so. I don't believe that they're capable. I mean, we're talking time difference. Mm-hmm. His lack of physical existence in our reality. And even if we're talking no time difference, we're talking about a linear distance of how far between here and Reticulum, good God. No.
He's back at Reticulum now.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware. They don't even want to discuss the matter with me, because it's a real sore point I did when I was not
you
supposed
pushed
to do.
him through a time hole.
I pushed him into one of
Stargate.
the Stargate units. Yeah, into the gray patch between the posts. Yeah,
And that was the end, at the end of your relationship with him?
that was the end of it. It's the last time I saw him.
I mean,
I think it was the end of their
it the-
relationship with him too, which is why they're so pissed off.
Why were you motivated to push him into
He asked me to. He told me he wanted to go home. He wanted to see his son. So I did.
So he was a prisoner, but at some point you were in a position. I'm thinking this was in Egypt. Somehow
was.
you guys were taken to Egypt,
Yeah, I was flown there.
and so was he.
Yeah, but over a different transport. He was already present by the time of my arrival. There was a communication protocol going on. He was communicating something, and I was never really told. All I was told was that there was a problem with his communication, and they wanted me to be there to cause him to relax or whatever to facilitate the discussion. And so they wanted me basically there as a as a ruse of kinship with him.
And had you?
And the kinship was no ruse, and that's something that they misinterpreted, I guess, over these years, that I have more of a kinship with a present-day human versus him. And to me, although he was offset, although he appeared different, that he didn't belong, he's still a human being, and a human is a human is a human to me. So I had a true friendship with him. There was a true affection there between the two, because he was showing me things from his childhood and I was showing him things from mine, and we were actually enjoying each other's experience of each other. It was a true friendship, and I don't really think that Majestic ever regarded it that way. They feel themselves so damn superior, or that we're superior to them. And maybe it's a reaction. I don't know, maybe I'm rationalizing it, that it's a reaction to the P-45's feeling that we're inferior. The so-called rogues' feeling of us, maybe it's some sort of a railing against that, or a reaction against that they developed the attitude. I don't know, but I know that I wasn't superior to him and he wasn't superior to me.
I'm just trying to figure out why in Egypt he was there. I'm obviously doing some work with them.
He was there as part of a communication program that they had ongoing after our program, and way after, almost a decade.
Almost 10 years later.
Well, I mean, it had ended in 96, and we had some more briefings in 97, but that was about it.
So you're saying that this happened recently, that you pushed him into the Stargate?
It happened at the end of 2003. And, I could tell from the relationship with him that he was being honest with me. Now, again, there have been those that have criticized and said, well, look, this guy is 52,000 years along an evolutionary line, that he had the ability, if he was a human being, to lie. And we talked with each other about lying, and Majestic never knew that. But he told me about things which would be happening in the future, generally inconsequential things. And then there were some very consequential items. But some generally inconsequential things that happened subsequent, which told me not only was he from the future, that he had access to future material, because nobody could have predicted conversations, but that he was being honest with me as well. I could feel his heart. The spirit that I judged him by was what I was feeling from him, from his heart, from his mind. And I judged him by his relationship with his child, by how he regarded his mother, by all of these things that we choose to regard in the human family to make decisions about each other. The same things. I mean, these common things were still present.
So
there were many uncommon aspects to their society, to the negating of emotion and the negating of personal names out in society, but still being carried within families. There was a common theme to the human family which was still extant in his time. I used that as part of my prudent discernment of him, or God, I hope it was, that he was a good human being.
you assisted him in going through the Stargate.
I pushed the Segway type transport set on the stroller. They looked like bell jars almost, over the top of Segway type strollers, where you could, almost waist height, where the bar was, where you could push it in whatever direction, and it took very little effort to move it. And he asked me to go home.
So you pushed him, and
I did.
what happened to you when you pushed him?
I pushed forward, then the next feeling was a feeling of numbness. For a brief moment, I thought I really screwed up, maybe killed myself or whatever, because I literally felt numb everywhere. Then I remember a flash of gray, and then I was seated coughing on a block about 20, 30 meters away maybe, and I had people rushing up to me, still over dramatically, actually cocking an automatic firearm at me, screaming at me, and I was grabbed, picked up from the block, and taken over and said, you're under arrest. And I mean, I had committed a violation of the protocols, and I was being threatened with weapons to my head and things like that.
So how did Majestic...
What did he say to you? And are you a spy? And they were just acting paranoid. No, I wasn't a spy. I just shoved him into the Stargate, and he went bye-bye.
How did Majestic react after that to you?
Very angry, including the people with whom I'm the closest, save the one present. Very angry toward me.
And how do they act? How does Majestic act when it's angry? I guess this gets back to, haven't you been tortured? I mean, isn't this right?
I don't call it torture, aside from the fact that I've been falsely imprisoned. That's torture. I was, for a couple periods of time, put at S4 in level 3 and basically told that's where you are for now.
Level 3 meaning, was it a
S4.
cell?
No, it was one of the rooms, one of the small suites, if you will, which were originally put in. There's 12 of them in this trident. There's 3 groups of 4, and I was put in Bay Unit 1 over to the left, and it was essentially, it contained all the amenities. I could ask for food, got anything I wanted, except for I couldn't leave. There was no freedom. The other items are acts of unkindness, and acts of unkindness from Majestic can range from everything from psychological unkindness, being rude to you, to being threatening, to being physically harmful. And I have been beaten, I have been slapped, I have been physically restrained, meaning handcuffed, and beaten and slapped. I have been put under lights. Well, hell, I had friends doing that to me. But I had, put under intense lights and while being handcuffed, as in interrogated. I have been told to shut my mouth to the point where 2 people grabbed me. One shoved me down onto the floor of a garage, and the other one stomped on and broke my hand.
So, and these were the members of Majestic that carried out these attacks? In other words, they didn't hire someone?
Numbers. Not the J numbers. These are operatives.
Operatives.
As in security personnel, yeah.
I see. So not the 1 through 12, but
people
that work for
none of them have laid an unkind hand on me ever. I don't know what they're truly carrying in their hearts, in their minds. And so there exists a possibility that affection can be granted either honestly or disingenuously.
You're basically saying that Majestic is operating as independent of the government. Is that correct? Or are they operating under the...
Yes and no. They were set independent of direct presidential authority as far back as the late 40s. However, there's more than one individual who has set as a member of the 12 who are intimately involved with the United States government to include its highest levels.
Okay, those people were actually ordering you to be, as a result, let's say, of this sort of overstepping the line, pushing J-Rod into the Stargate. They were ordering you to be sequestered, to be beaten or harmed in some way.
By the time that happened, all the beatings happened prior to that. By the time that happened, there was basically, they didn't know what to do with me. It was coming near the end of my time, my usefulness, basically. Anyway, aside from being almost an elder statesman with them, because I'd been around for like 20 years. My physical condition has gotten worse. Well, not well, physically. So I would not be of any use inside of a laboratory.
Now, it's important when we listen to testimonies from whistleblowers like Dan Bush that we are skeptical, that we look into all of this. And so we have to see for ourselves, is Majestic 12, is that a real organization? Is that a real group that existed that was meant to gatekeep and silence UFO whistleblowers that had special access to these programs? And I was able to find a document on official websites, government websites, that show that a lot of this stuff might be bogus, but when you look at these documents and actually start to go down through them, it might tell a different story.
So this is what I found about Majestic 12 when I did a deep dive on the internet looking for this. And it's actually on the FBI official website. Here it is, Majestic 12. These are the alleged documents that expose MJ12 as potentially being a real program. But it does say all over these documents that not only are they redacted, but written very large across the screen is the word bogus several times on these pages, like it's been proven wrong or like these documents are not real. But it openly talks about Majestic 12, and it has a lot of very official looking names and documentation found within the writing of these pages. Here we see Majestic 12, Magi 12, a group which was established by specific classified executive order of President Truman. And there's James T. Forrestal's name right there in the beginning pages. And we know that Forrestal has been mentioned and comes up multiple times in the UFO crash recovery projects and UFO disclosure. And Forrestal was actually allegedly tossed out of a window in order to, or off of a balcony, and murdered as part of his understanding. Now, it talks about all of this, that these there are observed several different disc-shaped aircraft traveling in formation at a high rate of speed. It mentions how there is the Roswell crash, the Roswell Army Air Base, where this craft was taken after it was crashed out in the desert. And it mentions a lot of the details of that there was human-like beings that had apparently ejected from the craft at the point of the crash or even before it exploded. So some of these entities allegedly were ejected from that craft. The document goes on. It says that there is a covert analytical effort organized by a general, and I can't quite read the name. Maybe you know who it is, but you can see right across the screen, it says in big writing that these documents are allegedly bogus. But how convenient that it's not all redacted. It's just written across as being a bogus document. Now, we have to take all of this with speculation. We don't know if it's real or not. But this documentation flat out talks about these are extraterrestrial biological entities, and they even name them EBEs in this document. And we hear that coming up all the time. So either the same types of terminology are being used to this day that were used back in this document, or somebody that forged these documents knew a lot about the programs and what they were talking about. it talks about the U.S. Air Force Project Sign, SIGN. And when you look into Project Sign, and I looked that up, lo and behold, there is on the official CIA website how to investigate a flying saucer. This was released telling the story about Lonnie Zamora and his encounter in Socorro, New Mexico, where he allegedly went up and discovered a downed or crashed UAP out in the desert of New Mexico. And Zamora's name comes up in this document on how to handle a UFO crash. And it goes into all of the details, the forensics about how the crash happened, where his car was, where the hills were in the incident, the road that he was on, how fast things were going, and even a black car that allegedly pulled up and stopped at the incident, watched what was going on, and then sped away, and how Zamora actually tried to follow that car to see if they knew what was going on or if they were involved. But we have Zamora's name all over this CIA page. And this is an actual official CIA website that talks about this whole incident. And when you do a word search for Project Sign to see if it was a real program, it comes up associated and affiliated with the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio, and Project Blue Book. So Project Sign or Operation Sign was a predecessor to Project Blue Book. And we see that here when we do the word search, how they established a group to investigate and evaluate sightings. So there's Nathan Twining. That's the name that was covered over slightly in the MJ-12 document. And here it is on the official CIA website as well, General Nathan Twining, that he established Project Sign. It was officially named Project Saucer, and then eventually it gave way to Project Grudge and then Project Blue Book, which we know was run by J. Allen Hynek. And I'm friends with J. Allen Hynek's son, Paul Hynek. I also found it fascinating that there seems to be that stone circle listed in there, which I found multiple times at alleged UFO hotspots, where they have a stone circle affiliated with Native American rituals that have been done there before. So I don't know if that's affiliated with that or not, but I thought that picture was interesting. And there's Project Sign named in the MJ-12 documents, Project Grudge, and also the code name Blue Book listed right here. So everything seems to sort of line up, and also several mentions of Majestic 12. And the document goes on to talk about the disclosure and declassification of information as part of this whole process. Now, I've also found that this Majestic 12 document, at least a copy of it, was found on incident in Salt Lake City. It says right here that these documents were dropped off by an anonymous individual in Salt Lake City. This person picked them up and then turned these documents over to the FBI. And it mentions that these names in here, H.B. Brandon, that name is in there as well in this document, and we can dig into that a little bit. But it goes on about Salt Lake City and the division, how the agent took these documents about Majestic 12, and then all of these sections of the Majestic 12 documents are now redacted. We have no idea what's under this blacked out section here. But it does also talk about Operation Majestic 12, U.S. Air Force Project Sign, or Project Grudge. So we have all of these names continuing to line up. And then we also have the name Brandon showing up in here as well. And there's the name Harry B. Brandon III, which is very interesting, as the acting assistant director
intelligence division. And I was able to verify that Harry B. Brandon was actually the director of intelligence. Here, the document goes on. It continues to mention Operation Majestic 12. And it sounds like this was one of the initial predecessors or secret programs that went on tied to Project Sign, Project Grudge, and Project Blue Book, which we know changes names frequently. And I would imagine that there is a specific name and title to this program going on to this day. Now, the document continues on from here, but it's pretty much a repeat of everything that we've seen already. This is allegedly the second half of all these pages is just a duplicate mostly of what we saw earlier. And so I would imagine that this is the copy that was found in Salt Lake City and was turned over to the FBI for study. But here we have one page in here that looks like it was written to Secretary Forrestal, which we talked about earlier, and signed by President Harry Truman. So fascinating document, this MJ12 file. And if those of you that are curious and want to go down through it and look for more detail to try and decipher things that they can understand, I'll put the link down in the description box below for that. I wanted to dig a little bit deeper and go down the rabbit hole to see if I could find anything more. And allegedly, Majestic 12, MJ12, came up in the Wilson-Davis memo. Now, if you don't know what the Wilson-Davis memo is, it's an actual transcripted conversation that happened between Admiral Wilson and Eric W. Davis. Eric W. Davis is a current partner with Hal Puthoff, and these two people have been both to Skinwalker Ranch, Mount Wilson Ranch, places that I've personally gone and researched myself. But Eric W. Davis has been at the center of this UFO mystery, trying to uncover these crash recovery programs. And in the Wilson-Davis memo, they have a very telling conversation where the name Majestic 12 actually comes up in the Wilson-Davis memo, which to me makes it seem like if it wasn't real, why would they even be talking about it? They also mentioned some other interesting details about the UFO crash recovery program. So let's take a look at the Wilson-Davis memo. This is the official transcript of the Wilson-Davis memo between Eric Davis and Admiral Wilson. And it is a very fascinating read to go down through. You can tell throughout the entire thing that Eric W. Davis is really pressing Admiral Wilson for a lot of information, trying to get him to drop names, program names, and mention things about the UFO crash recovery program, specifically mentioning MJ12 and Roswell and crashed UFO alien bodies. We know that Eric W. Davis has worked with metamaterial with Hal Puthoff, even with Tom DeLonge at To the Stars Academy, involved in the analysis of the metamaterial that allegedly came from the Roswell crash. This was smuggled to Hal Puthoff by astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who actually knew friends and family members because he was born in Roswell, New Mexico. Edgar Mitchell was born there, and I believe that he was the one that sent Art's parts to Art Bell from the Roswell crash, the Corona crash, and he sent some of these smuggled UFO parts to Art Bell in a shoebox, specifically intending for them to be discovered by Linda Moulton Howe and then studied by Travis Taylor, who works at Skinwalker Ranch as one of the lead scientists there now. And then those parts were actually given to Hal Puthoff. And when Hal Puthoff obtained them, they went to the Stars Academy, and they've been studied by specialists even at Lockheed Martin. But in this entire conversation, it talks about the recovery of crashed craft, and that Admiral Wilson initially thought that this was some kind of a cover-up from a secret military project where they had recovered a military craft. But the more that even he looked into this, he was told by other officials that this was not human made and that these were non-human objects, including the biologics or the bodies found with the craft. So we see Admiral Wilson talking about how he was trying to even press the different people there about the UFO crash. And then Stephen Greer's name is also dropped in here, as well as Edgar Mitchell. It says that Miller told Ed Mitchell, who only told him in 1999. That is a note from Eric W. Davis. And Eric Davis, he even dropped Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, recently in a talk or conference with official members of Congress there. And we'll get into that in just a minute. But this entire document, I'm also going to put this down in the description box so that you can click it and go read it for yourself. But here you can see in the Wilson Davis memo that Eric W. Davis is asking Admiral Wilson specifically, like, for all these questions. And he's like, sorry, no, I can't tell you. He's like, it's too secret. This is beyond secret. We can't discuss this. He even says at one point that, like, if you claim that we had this conversation, I'm going to deny it. But he said that in this conversation with other officials, he asked if they had heard of MJ-12 and some organization and code names relating to crashed, recovered UFO craft. And Eric W. Davis digs in further and says, well, who were they? And he says, I don't know. These programs are too secret, basically. He refuses to tell a lot of things, but there is some critical information that we can find in this if it's true. But the whole point of this is, why would they even be talking about Majestic 12 and UFO crash recovery programs at this level in this Wilson Davis memo if it's not real? If MJ-12 was not an official program that was happening, why would they even be talking about it in such a manner as if it was real? Eric W. Davis says, did they show him craft or hardware that was alien or from a UFO? And Admiral Wilson says they didn't say any more about that. He keeps talking about how Admiral Wilson, how he was denied access. Like, these programs have been even more compartmentalized that not even the White House, Congress, or congressional staffers have access to this. But he did say that in special meetings that he heard that there was a reverse engineering program, something recovered from years ago in the past. Technology and hardware was recovered, and that they thought that it was UFO, that it was definitely not made by humans. And it says that they had a craft, an intact craft that they believed could fly. And he asked if it was from overseas, and they said, no, it could not be, not possible. It was technology that was not of this earth, not made by man, not by human hands. And this is Admiral Wilson talking to Eric W. Davis and claiming all of these things as though that they are real. And so as we listen to the earlier testimony from Dan Burrish, we have to take all this into account. It mentions the Roswell crash as being real with craft bodies and autopsies. There is Zamora's name, and it mentions the Bentwaters incident. So should we assume that Zamora's crash landing was also real? And it also says the MJ-12 leak documents are up there. Wilson also mentions Stephen Greer's name and Philip J. Corso as also being in the know and having knowledge about this. So I find that also very fascinating. There we have the name Miller and Greer, talking about Stephen Greer. And we know that he is the developer of CE5, Psionic Contact, and that whole app. But Wilson says that the people that he believed that were involved in this were more corporate types, scientists, technicians, and engineers, and that they were less political. He was asked by Eric Davis about what did they say, and he said UFOs are real.
but so-called alien abductions are not real. So he claimed that someone named Gansler said that UFOs are real, but the abductions are not. Then Eric W. Davis presses Admiral Wilson and asks him if he's willing to talk to Hal Puthoff or Kit Green.
Eric Davis has come out with a lot of information, not just the Wilson Davis memo. He's recently done some podcast interviews and other interviews, but he was also at a conference that Congressman Burleson was attending, and he talked about different alien types and other mind-blowing information. So let's take a look at what he had to say.
My background is in advanced deep space and interstellar space flight, mostly vacuum light propulsion for the use of general relativity theory and quantum field theory, as well as advanced nuclear propulsion like nuclear fission and nuclear fusion. And beamed energy propulsion, which I worked on as a principal investigator for the Air Force Research Lab in Airborne Air Force Base. So I've got quite a broad background. And I began my work in UFOs where I started in 1996. Robert Bigelow hired me to work for him as his director of aerospace physics and astrophysics at the National Institute of Discovery Science. And that was a pretty transformative job for me, because as a physical scientist, I'm seeing for the first time live phenomenon. I'm investigating it using forensic sounding techniques in the field, interviewing witnesses, collecting data. And I have a team of colleagues on the staff that I hang with, also PhDs. And we had a world-class science advisory board, which my former boss in Austin, Hal Puthoff, was on that science advisory board and was the last chair of that board, actually. We also had Apollo 14 astronaut Ed Mitchell, and for a short time Apollo 17 astronaut Jack Schmidt. And we had many academicians and former CIA national intelligence officers, social psychologists, medical doctors, and nuclear engineers, and the list goes on. We had Chuck Boldy pretty as well. So it was a really transformative, because I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I became familiar with Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan and Strong Report Page co-authored a book called UFOs, A Scientific Debate, which was published by the AAAS Press. The AAAS is the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and science is their prestigious journal that they publish. And so that was a prestigious publication. Every chapter was authored by experts in the field in academia who have studied UFOs and some angle of it from a scientific data standpoint. Data that's collected, data that was analyzed. And so they presented it and published a book. For a bizarre reason, in the 1980s, Carl Sagan had this wonderful astronomy show called Cosmos, and we companion book for that. And what's ironic is that he changed 180 degrees. He all of a sudden went from being UFOs we had in this book that I co-authored or co-edited with Dorothy Page, all of this wonderful data that's been collected that's not explainable to conventional astronomical, weather, or man-made explanations or events or objects. So these craft, I don't have the security clearances I need to get access to the technical details that I made to understand that the craft are consistent in size with the Tic Tac, even double in size of the Tic Tac. That would be up to about 100 feet long by 50 feet diameter of that type. A boomerang-shaped craft, arrow-shaped craft, triangular-shaped craft, and so forth. The biggest ones that had been observed, especially that we investigated in Edmonds in 1999, involved the Sky Air Force Base. That way, it was a 600-foot-long craft, and it was about roughly 100 feet tall. And so they don't have possession of craft like that. I've never been told that. It's usually the more man scale.
Something they couldn't move.
Yeah.
So we might be able to.
Yeah. So we can only speculate. I know Jim Kasky wrote in his book. I don't remember the time of it, but anyway, it was called Colin Kelder, why he worked with Miz, and George Knapp of KLAS TV in Las Vegas. And so Jim mentioned, and Jim is the program manager for the AAS, the OSAP, the AAS WAP, and so basically he described in his book, somebody, I don't know if it was him because I think he said it was him, went inside one of these craft that he had access to, and they couldn't recognize any propulsion or power devices or systems inside the craft. It was completely unusual. Charles Taylor and I have speculated that possibly they're teleporting energy from a remote, distant location where the energy is produced based on according to the craft. And that's how the craft can move around without having to carry propellant or rocket engine or an advanced warp drive engine. That's one possibility that we speculate.
On the material, so what you have, you think is carbon can take multiple forms, right? And are you saying that that is the same with other material, other elements? The way in which what we found is different forms
of these elements that we.
It would be different calories. It'd be different combinations of the elements.
Is that I see a bit ratios as well, correct?
Yeah. So you're going to have a variety of whatever structural part of this that came off of the EDP. I don't know because I didn't have way better adult SAP access. I only had TSSCI. So at the SCI level, I was informed that there would be combinations of elements from the periodic table, combinations of their isotopes. So you have a variety of elements as they naturally occur, or some isotopes of them mixed together in a certain way, and then they're structurally built in a very unusual way that even today we have no equivalent or analog to it. So this is about as much as I was given information in this.
And do you have or can you comment on whatever species have been that piloting these craft? How are they large? Are they multiple species? Are they what was their size, and how many are usually on a craft?
They're typically the multiple species. People are really like the grays and mordays. People were talking about reptilians and insectoids. It's not that they're reptilian or insectoid, it's that they resemble to the presidium of reptile or an insect type human, because they have this a hand, four limbs, and torso.
So large, small,
human size, human scale.
and other how big are crew?
Well, the Greys I'm familiar with from investigating the crash at Coronia, which is misnamed the crash of Roswell. It's not the crash of Roswell, it's the crash of Perovia, Mexico. Those were Greys, those were both the tall. And the Nordics are typically human size, probably, I try 5-6 feet tall. And same with the people who mislabel reptilian and insectoid, they're roughly that top height too. I haven't heard anything about anything 7 great feet, 9 feet tall.
My last several long-form videos, we've talked about a lot of interesting stuff. These psionic asset exploitation programs that are using artificial intelligence to communicate and track UFOs, UAP, whether they're in the sky in outer space, hiding underground, under the mountains, or even down in the ocean. And it sounds like what's happening is these people with telepathic abilities and gifts are being exploited and used, sometimes even as children, in order to interface with this technology, and more currently with the artificial intelligence, Sylvia, Sadie, and Ocarina, in order to communicate and track where UFOs are, where they're going, how they behave, and what type they are. This sounds like there's a full-blown program in order to track UFOs. Matthew Brown is associated with this program out of the Pentagon, where he had access to Immaculate Constellation. This is a global satellite program and tracking program that is probably interfaced with this artificial intelligence and part of all of this tracking that's going on with the use of psionic assets. Now, we don't know if Dan Burrich, his witness testimony is real or if he's telling the truth, but we've dug in tonight into all of those Majestic 12 documents. We've even tied them to the Wilson Davis memo, and it seems to mention Majestic 12 as though it is a real thing. So it's up to you to decide, is this crash recovery program real, or is it just a cover and a psyop in order to hide the secret technology that's actually in use? It seems like if it is real, then it's a very dangerous thing to be talking about all this. If it's not real, then maybe it's time that we blow their cover and that we all learn the truth.